now belongs to me.
Hello X-fans, ready for a trip down memory lane? Let's dive into X-Men, the animated series, and relive the adventures that made us all dream of being mutants. Premiering in 1992 and running for 5 seasons, this iconic show brought Marvel's beloved mutants to the small screen, tackling complex themes and resonating with fans of all ages. With its 90s under-budget animation, amazing voice acting, and memorable memes, X-Men. The animated series left a lasting mark on pop culture. Before we begin, let's go through some background for better understanding of the series. Led by the quick-minded Cyclops, the team features iconic members like Wolverine, Rogue, Storm, Beast, Gambit, Jubilee, Jean Grey, and the sage Professor X. The series also introduces the mysterious original character Morph, inspired by the shape-shifting changeling. With versatile stories, it fearlessly tackles societal issues such as divorce, religion, the Holocaust, and the theme of loneliness. With that, let's get right into it. The series begins with Jubilee overhearing her foster parents discussing her situation. They mention that a mutant control agency is coming to take her away, believing it's the best thing for her. Frightened, Jubilee runs away and heads to the mall to play video games. Meanwhile, a Sentinel crashes into the mall, searching for her. Fortunately, Storm, Rogue, and Gambit are there and they battle the Sentinel, giving Jubilee a chance to escape. Outside the mall, she encounters Cyclops, but faints after running through a smoke grenade. Subsequently, Cyclops destroys the Sentinel by blasting off its head with his optic beam. Jubilee wakes up at Xavier's school for gifted children. While attempting to escape, she stumbles into the danger room,
Wolverine.
where Wolverine and Gambit are fighting. Thinking Wolverine would hurt Gambit, Jubilee blasts him. However, Morph and Beast walk in and everything settles down. Later, Storm takes Jubilee aside and explains about the X-Mansion Professor X, their abilities, and what they stand for as X-Men. Using information from the disembodied Sentinel head, they discover that the Mutant Control Agency is leaking information, which is why a Sentinel came for Jubilee. Consequently, Jubilee tries to go home thinking Sentinels would come after her foster parents. However, she is captured along the way by 2 Sentinels and Henry Gyrich. Meanwhile, Wolverine decides to investigate Jubilee's disappearance and finds that her trail goes cold just outside her house. Eventually, the X-Men gather to break into the Mutant Control Agency headquarters. Wolverine, Morph, Beast, and Storm infiltrate the perimeter and disable the security systems. After breaking into the headquarters of the Mutant Control Agency and destroying the mutant files, the X-Men face a battle with the Sentinels. Unfortunately, they lose 2 members. Beast is captured and imprisoned, and Morph is killed by a Sentinel. In response, Wolverine demands to go back for them,
Then we blow it up.
but is prevented by Cyclops and Rogue. Later, he vows to avenge Morph's death. Meanwhile, Henry Gyrich interrogates a captive Jubilee at his Sentinel manufacturing facility in Detroit, Michigan. The President of the United States, an unnamed woman, publicly announces the X-Men's raid on the Federal Security Agency headquarters and reveals the existence of the Sentinels. Subsequently, Cyclops locates Wolverine at a bar and asks for his help in finding the Sentinels' home base. At the same time, the President orders Gyrich to shut down his privately funded mutant registration program, concerned that the X-Men might have had a valid reason for destroying Gyrich's mutant files. Meanwhile, Jubilee's foster father calls Gyrich, informing him that Cyclops is in his house. Gyrich asks him to keep Cyclops there as long as possible. However, Jubilee's foster father, after talking to his wife, decides to warn Cyclops, realizing that Jubilee might have been kidnapped by the Sentinels. As Cyclops leaves the house, a Sentinel attacks him.
Of course. Not.
He fights back by purposely blasting off its arm so that the damaged Sentinel will return to base for repairs. The X-Men follow it in the Blackbird, tracking it back to the base. There, they destroy all the Sentinels present and rescue Jubilee. However, Gyrich and his manufacturer, Bolivar Trask, manage to escape. Finally, Jubilee bids farewell to her foster parents and moves into the Xavier Institute. After the X-Men's daring raid on the Mutant Control Agency, Beast finds himself imprisoned, enduring the taunts of ignorant guards. However, his situation takes a dramatic turn when Magneto arrives to break him out. Despite Magneto's efforts, Beast refuses to leave, determined to use the upcoming court case alongside Professor Xavier to prove that mutants pose no danger to humans. Magneto, respecting Beast's decision, disarms... disarms the guards and destroys the gathering tanks and helicopters outside before departing. Meanwhile, at the Institute, Xavier takes the opportunity to explain to Jubilee the complex history between himself and Magneto. He recounts their initial friendship, which blossomed after a war during Xavier's time working in a psychiatric hospital. He recalls about a dedicated young aide named Magnus, who had assisted him. Magnus, Xavier reveals, hailed from a small country ravaged by war where he tragically lost his family. When soldiers attacked the hospital and kidnapped a patient treated by Xavier and Magnus, they unintentionally exposed their mutant powers by rescuing her. However, the situation escalated when Magnus, overwhelmed by anger, desired to retaliate against the soldiers. Xavier, recognizing the danger of such actions, intervened and restrained Magnus. Frustrated and disillusioned, Magnus left abruptly, adopting the name Magneto. With time, he gathered a growing legion of followers and began a campaign of attacks on power plants, factories, and government buildings, all in preparation for a mutant takeover. Xavier successfully destroyed his plans then, but now, years later, Magneto has returned to continue his mission. While Jubilee expresses confidence in the X-Men's ability to defeat him, Xavier appears less certain, knowing the formidable challenge they face. As Cyclops and Wolverine attend Beast's trial, they find themselves amidst a sea of anti-mutant protests both inside and outside the court. The prosecutor wastes no time in moving to deny bail for Beast, citing his mutant status as justification. In response, Beast's lawyer, Mr. Hodge, argues passionately that such a decision would be solely based on prejudice against mutants. Despite Mr. Hodge's plea, the judge assures him of impartiality and grants Beast the opportunity to address the court directly.
Address the court on the subject of mitigating circumstances.
Standing before the court, Beast recounts his perspective, highlighting the mysterious disappearance of 11 mutants who were recent registrants with the Mutant Control Agency prior to his attack on their headquarters. However, his claims are met with ridicule, with some dismissing his accusations against an organization supposedly established to aid mutants. Despite Beast's impassioned plea, the judge ultimately denies his bail request, citing concerns partly fueled by Magneto's recent violent attack on the detention center. As tensions rise, Wolverine is eager to free Beast immediately, but their plans are interrupted by the sudden arrival of Sabretooth, who also seeks to liberate Beast. Chaos ensues as the guards move to subdue Sabretooth, prompting Cyclops to intervene to prevent any further escalation, including Sabretooth's potential execution. Sabretooth, critically injured, is rushed to the Xavier mansion and placed in the infirmary for urgent medical attention. However, tensions arise when Wolverine, harboring undisclosed animosity toward Sabretooth, attempts to disconnect his life support and take matters into his own hands. His actions are swiftly halted by the united front of Cyclops, Jubilee, Xavier, and Storm. Despite Wolverine's insistence that Sabretooth poses a significant threat and should be removed from the mansion, the others remind him of his own struggles upon first arriving at the mansion, invoking a sense of empathy and understanding. Their deliberations are abruptly interrupted by an alarm signaling Magneto's assault on a nearby missile base, prompting the X-Men to spring into action. Despite the irony of battling Xavier's former adversary while being urged to treat Sabretooth leniently, Wolverine joins Cyclops, Storm, and the others to confront Magneto. At the missile base, tensions escalate as Magneto initiates the launch sequence, targeting the facility and forcing all soldiers to evacuate. Cyclops, Storm, and Wolverine confront him, prompting a brief exchange where Magneto initially assumes they intend to join him until their true allegiance is revealed. In a display of his formidable power, Magneto effortlessly incapacitates them before delivering a cryptic message for Xavier and departing. In a race against time, Storm intercepts the launched missiles, guided telepathically by Xavier, and redirects them harmlessly into a nearby body of water. With their mission accomplished, the X-Men regroup aboard the Blackbird and depart. Meanwhile, Magneto reflects on the X-Men's education under Xavier's guidance and laments what he perceives as Xavier's betrayal of mutant kind. In an attempt to understand the root of Sabretooth's anger, Xavier delves into his mind, seeking to offer help and support. However, he encounters unexpected resistance when Sabretooth fiercely fights back, prompting Xavier to cease his efforts. To their surprise, they discover Sabretooth securely restrained in the infirmary, raising questions about the source of his aggression. Gathering in Xavier's office, Cyclops, Storm, and Wolverine recount the events at the army base. Xavier sheds light on Magneto's ideology, explaining his belief that mutants represent the next stage in human evolution. Amidst the discussion, Xavier shares some unexpected good news, revealing that Sabretooth is safely confined in the mission room. Wolverine, fueled by his own distrust and desire for Sabretooth's removal, confronts him with a veiled threat. He acknowledges his ongoing efforts to help Sabretooth manage his anger, yet acknowledges the existence of inaccessible parts of his mind. Sabretooth, in a surprising revelation, admits to their past friendship but acknowledges the existence of unresolved disagreements between them. Wolverine faces off with Sabretooth, his anger clear as he talks about the pain Sabretooth caused his friends. However, when Xavier asks Wolverine to help with Sabretooth's treatment, Wolverine refuses and leaves.
Deal with Wolverine's attitude later. Right now, we can't be distracted from our more urgent problem.
As a result, Xavier shifts his focus to Magneto, whom he believes will likely attack again soon. True to Xavier's prediction, Magneto launches an attack on a factory, causing significant trouble. Xavier swiftly mobilizes the X-Men to stop him, leaving Jubilee to watch over Sabretooth. Despite their attempts to reason with Magneto, he remains stubborn and continues causing chaos. Eventually, Xavier tries to make Magneto remember bad memories, which prompts him to leave. With the factory crisis averted, the X-Men manage to escape.
President recklessly rescinded the Mutant Registration Act.
But Senator Kelly's threatening speech about putting mutants in camps adds to their worries. Meanwhile, Jubilee and Sabretooth watch Senator Kelly's press conference. Initially, Sabretooth threatens Kelly, but then he apologizes to Jubilee for scaring her. He admits to pretending to get better and reveals that Magneto sent him to take over the Institute. However, tensions escalate when Sabretooth threatens Jubilee again, leading to a confrontation with Wolverine. In the ensuing scuffle, Jubilee uses her powers to save Wolverine and push Sabretooth away. Despite Sabretooth's escape, Wolverine is injured and is promptly taken to the infirmary. Later, Xavier apologizes to Wolverine for not listening to him. Meanwhile, Magneto remains convinced that more mutants will join him. The X-Men gather in the Danger Room for training, under the watchful eyes of Professor Xavier and Cyclops in the control room. However, things take a turn when the simulation intensifies, triggering Storm's claustrophobia and causing her to lose control of her powers. Once the program is deactivated, Storm confesses her reluctance to continue leading the team. Meanwhile, Jean pays a visit to Wolverine, who is still recuperating from his encounter with Sabretooth. Instead of resting, she finds him exercising, sparking a moment of tension between them. Jean mentions that Cyclops is waiting for her, prompting Wolverine to confess that he's also been waiting for her. Later, Jean and Cyclops, dressed in civilian clothes, attend a performance of the Phantom of the Opera. As they exit the theater, they witness a small mutant boy named Leech stealing fruit from a stall, only to be chased by a violent human mob. Seeking refuge, Leech runs into a subway station where he reunites with his friends, the Morlocks. However, tensions escalate when the Morlocks retaliate against the humans, prompting Jean and Cyclops to intervene. Their efforts are thwarted when Annalee renders them unconscious. Subsequently, Sunder and the Morlocks' leader Callisto take Cyclops, Jean, and the other humans down to the Morlocks' tunnels. Cyclops awakens to a disorienting reality. He's without his visor, tied down and powerless, courtesy of Leech, the young mutant he had previously tried to help. Leech explains that he's taken away Cyclops' powers as a gesture of gratitude. As Cyclops is brought before Callisto, the Morlocks' leader, he learns the truth about their community. They're mutants, whose deformities prevent them from passing as human on the surface. Callisto desires Cyclops as her companion, hoping he'll provide her with an heir. However, Cyclops staunchly refuses and demands to see Jean, who is also captive. Despite their captivity, Jean manages to break free momentarily, utilizing her telekinesis to fend off their captors before being recaptured. Before being apprehended again, she sends a telepathic distress signal to Xavier. Responding swiftly, Xavier sends the remaining X-Men, excluding Jubilee, into the subway to rescue Cyclops and Jean. The team faces ambushes by the Morlocks but manages to navigate through the tunnels, albeit facing increasingly perilous obstacles. Rogue and Gambit express concern for Storm, who insists she's fine, while Wolverine asserts that Storm should be allowed to make her own choices. As the team presses forward, they eventually locate Jean, who now believes herself to be Annalee's daughter due to a psychic manipulation. Wolverine intervenes, breaking Annalee's hold over Jean. Determined to find Cyclops, they encounter Callisto, who claims that Cyclops is dead. However, Wolverine, relying on his heightened senses, sees through the deception. The body they believe to be Cyclops is actually that of Ape, a shape-shifting Morlock. The X-Men engage in a fierce battle with the Morlocks, initially gaining the upper hand until Gambit falls ill with a fever caused by the Morlock plague. Storm, recognizing the severity of the situation, instructs Rogue to escort Gambit back to the safety of the mansion. Meanwhile, Wolverine, in pursuit of Callisto, finally locates Cyclops. Despite momentarily considering eliminating Cyclops, Wolverine ultimately relents, unable to bear the thought of Jean's anguish. However, an unsuspecting Callisto overhears Wolverine's inner conflict and realizes his unspoken feelings for Jean. As Wolverine reunites with Storm and Jean, Annalee attempts to manipulate Wolverine into carrying out her bidding and killing Cyclops. Jean intervenes, breaking Annalie's control over Wolverine and disabling her powers. With the X-Men outnumbered and facing imminent execution, Storm challenges Callisto to a duel for Cyclops' life and leadership of the Morlocks. Callisto agrees under the condition that Storm refrains from using her mutant abilities. Despite the handicap, Storm emerges victorious, earning the respect of the Morlocks. In a surprising turn of events, Storm offers the Morlocks sanctuary at the Xavier Mansion, but they opt to remain in their tunnels under Callisto's leadership. As the X-Men return to the mansion, Gambit's recovery brings a sense of relief,
Tells me you acquitted yourself well as field commander.
and Xavier commends Storm for her leadership. Later, Scott and Jean seek to express their gratitude to Wolverine, only to find that he has departed the Institute. Jubilee, Storm, and Gambit find themselves locked up in a detention center on Genosha after they were caught in cold vengeance. They can't use their powers because they've been given special collars. The collars force them to work as slaves building a dam. When they're allowed to use their powers briefly for work, Storm tries to run, but Gambit stops Jubilee from joining her, knowing it won't work. Their disobedience gets their collars turned back on, and Storm is captured by a Sentinel. Bolivar Trask, the guy in charge, shows up and wants to kill Storm. Gambit makes a deal to save her life by saying Storm can fill the lake with her weather powers. Instead of killing her, they lock Storm in a small, tight space that makes her fear of small spaces worse. While the mutants are working on the dam, Gambit and the guards see a fire far away. Sentinels are sent to catch whoever started it, while the mutants are sent back to their cells. Later, there's a power outage in the detention center. Jubilee sees a chance to escape and tries to get the others to join her, but they refuse. Disappointed, Jubilee goes back to her cell when the lights come back on. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, Wolverine returns from his trip to Canada once again, much to Scott's dismay as they still can't reach their allies on Genosha. Concerned, the X-Men decide to head to Genosha to check on the situation. However, Xavier opts to stay behind, citing other responsibilities. Once the others depart, Xavier contacts his old friend Moira MacTaggart at the Muir Island Mutant Research Center in Scotland for assistance. On Genosha, Jubilee wakes up to find that Gambit has been taken away during the night. Determined to escape, she convinces the other mutants to join her breakout plan. However, their efforts are in vain as Gambit had informed the guards about their plan. Jubilee finds herself thrown into the box where she discovers a delirious Storm. Despite their dire situation, Storm remains hopeful, believing that Gambit will come to their rescue. Meanwhile, in a nearby factory, Bolivar Trask reveals the existence of Master Mold, a self-contained Sentinel production line, to Henry Gyrich, the Genosha leader known as the Leader, and Cameron Hodge, the development advisor. They disclose that the dam's purpose is to power Master Mold, which is straining the Genosha energy grid. Gambit is brought in for questioning about the X-Men, and although he promises to lead Gyrich to them, he is sent back to prison. However, Gambit manages to escape from his guards and encounters Cable, a heavily armed mercenary searching for the leader. Cable helps Gambit by providing him with a key to the control collars that he had stolen earlier. Elsewhere, Cameron Hodge reveals that Cable is believed to be an American mercenary who once served in the leader's army until he uncovered the leader's true intentions. Disillusioned, Cable turned against the leader, rejecting his wages and becoming a fugitive. There are suspicions that Cable may also possess mutant abilities. Gyrich proposes to eliminate Cable in exchange for a large quantity of control collars from the leader. Before any deal can be finalized, Cable launches an attack on the factory. Meanwhile, Gambit manages to rescue Jubilee and Storm from the box by destroying the Sentinel guarding them. Together, they assault the dam, with Jubilee seizing control of the power-dampening collars, liberating the slaves. However, the freed slaves refuse to aid in destroying the Sentinels until they have secured control of all of Genosha, departing from the scene. Cable infiltrates the Sentinel factory, decimating numerous Sentinels, and confronts the leader. As Master Mold generates a smaller prototype Sentinel, Cable engages it in combat, ultimately emerging victorious.
Not strong enough yet.
Meanwhile, Storm summons a powerful thunderstorm and heavy rain to obliterate the dam and the factory. Exhausted from her efforts, Storm is rescued just in time by Rogue. Amidst the chaos, Cable intercepts the fleeing leader and Cameron Hodge, preventing their escape. Despite Hodge pulling a gun on him before any further action can be taken, the flood waters from the destroyed dam surge towards them, engulfing all three in a massive wave. Inside the factory, Master Mold attempts to flee but is unable to escape the flood's path. The wave obliterates the factory. Returning to the Xavier Institute, the X-Men discover that the school has been completely demolished by the recent events. After discovering the devastation of the X-Mansion, the X-Men launch an investigation to identify the culprit responsible. Jubilee stumbles upon a mutant encased in pure steel, and assuming him to be a perpetrator, attempts to catch him. However, Wolverine recognizes that he is not the culprit based on his scent. Subsequently, Jubilee and Wolverine encounter Juggernaut in the midst of a bank robbery. Despite their efforts to subdue him, he proves too formidable to handle alone, and soon, the rest of the X-Men arrive on the scene. Jean explains that she cannot mentally affect Juggernaut due to his protective helmet. Therefore, Cyclops proposes a coordinated team effort to confront him. Their collaborative strategy proves effective, with Rogue managing to absorb some of Juggernaut's powers, uncovering the reason behind his destructive actions. Xavier is his half-brother, and he seeks revenge for perceived favoritism towards Xavier by their parents. Jean utilizes her telepathic abilities to erase Juggernaut's memories. With the situation resolved, the X-Men shift their focus to rebuilding the mansion, united in their determination to restore their home and continue their mission. In a private cabin, Gisela expresses fear to Warren Worthington about the presence of a mad scientist named Godfrey Adler. Warren reassures her, explaining that Adler is currently in Scotland conducting research. Suddenly, Cable appears, catching Warren off guard and demanding information about Adler. A gunshot rings out as Warren tumbles into the snow below. Cable turns to Gisela for answers and learns that Adler is at the Muir Island Research Center. Angel swoops in, attempting to stop Cable, but he manages to escape, leaving behind a scene of confusion. At the Muir Island Research Center, Professor Xavier tasks Moira MacTaggert with reviewing Dr. Adler's work, but she declines, citing complications. Despite Adler's refusal to meet with him, Xavier attempts to examine the doctor's mind, experiencing unsettling visions of two unknown mutants. Suspecting Adler may be a mutant himself, Xavier resolves to inform the X-Men about Adler's purported cure for mutant kind. Meanwhile, the X-Men diligently continue their efforts to rebuild the X-Mansion. Tensions rise as Wolverine directs blame towards Gambit for the mess. Their confrontation is stopped by Rogue, who intervenes to prevent a physical fight. Gathering with Professor Xavier, the X-Men learn about Dr. Adler's treatment, prompting a discussion about the complexities of choosing whether to embrace or reject one's mutant abilities. As Rogue drives away from the mansion, Gambit tails her closely. Rogue takes to the skies, catching a ride on a passing passenger plane's wing until she spots Muir Island below. Meanwhile, Avalanche and Pyro await Mystique in a local pub on Muir Island, suspecting Rogue may be her in disguise. A confrontation follows, with Rogue swiftly dispatching the two villains. Upon reaching Dr. Adler's lab, Rogue expresses her willingness to undergo his treatment for mutant cure. Dr. Adler agrees to consider her request, unaware that Dr. Adler is actually Mystique in disguise. Mystique receives orders from Apocalypse to make Rogue his slave instead of stripping her of her mutant abilities. Reflecting on her past, Rogue recalls the consequences of her first kiss with her boyfriend, Cody Robbins, which resulted in him losing his powers. Meanwhile, as Pyro searches the shores for Avalanche, he encounters Cable, who is still on the hunt for Dr. Adler. A confrontation ensues, resulting in Pyro being shot, only to be rescued by Avalanche. Avalanche and Pyro decide to kidnap Dr. Adler, believing there is a high demand for him. Rogue agrees to undergo the treatment, but before Dr. Adler can finish, Avalanche and Pyro swoop in and abduct him. Rogue and Cable give chase, leading to a dramatic showdown. During the chaos, Mystique's true identity is revealed as she tricks Avalanche and Pyro into kidnapping her instead of Dr. Adler. Meanwhile, Xavier, Cyclops, and Jean investigate the scene, suspecting Rogue's intentions regarding Dr. Adler's treatment. In the following battle, Rogue fights off Pyro and Avalanche while Cable confronts Dr. Adler over his involvement with the Generation Mutant Collar program.
Callers that suppressed mutant powers. Callers, you.
As tensions escalate, Cable threatens to push Dr. Adler off a cliff, prompting Rogue to intervene. Mystique reveals her shape-shifting abilities to stop Cable from harming her. The conflict draws in the X-Men, with Jean and Cable teetering on the edge of a cliff. In a daring rescue, Rogue saves Jean from a perilous fall. Ultimately, Rogue helps Dr. Adler repair his equipment but declines his offer for a cure.
Look out!
Look out yourself!
As she exits, she encounters Angel, who seeks treatment from Dr. Adler. Mystique reports to Apocalypse, informing him of another potential mutant slave, leading Apocalypse to plot the destruction of the world. Angel undergoes Dr. Adler's treatment before realizing that the Dr. Adler is actually Mystique. Apocalypse shows up and tells Mystique that she will be rewarded for her loyalty. Various mutants wait for their treatment in the local pub. Xavier and some of his X-Men discuss why mutants might not want their powers. Warren Worthington, IE, enters the pub and announces that he has been cured of his angel mutation. Cyclops tries telling Warren that there is nothing wrong with being a mutant. Rogue says it is up for each mutant to decide. Apocalypse watches security footage from the pub, revealing that Mystique is impersonating Angel. The real Warren Worthington says that Worthington is no more, that there is only Archangel. Apocalypse introduces his new team of slaves, famine, pestilence, war, and death, aka Archangel. Apocalypse says he will build a better world from the ashes of the current one, and sends forth his horsemen to spread chaos. Rogue and Gambit play a game of pool. Gambit says the winner gets a kiss from the loser, but Rogue does not like the prospect of draining anyone's energy. Storm turns on the television to view the World Peace Conference in Paris. The conference chairman brings up the matter of if they could disarm if mutants live among them. Apocalypse shows up and disrupts the conference and brings in his horsemen. War and Archangel take down the French army. Professor Xavier sends everyone in his X-Men group to look into the Apocalypse threat. However, he gives Rogue and Jubilee the mission to return to Muir Island, as he recognizes the members of the Horsemen as the mutants who are waiting to be cured there. The Horsemen spread chaos throughout the land. Famine gets rid of people's food or turns their weapons against them. Death destroys a dam. Rogue asks Dr. Adler about his treatment. Mystique reveals her disguise when Rogue straps her to the treatment machine. Mystique tells Rogue about Apocalypse's plans to use the treatment to make his slaves. Rogue lets Mystique go, but Mystique turns on her and tries to trap her. Rogue escapes from the exploding building. The rest of the X-Men deal with pestilence. Storm creates fog to cause her enemy to fall off her horse. The rest of the Horsemen recover pestilence, and the X-Men follow them to Apocalypse. Rogue flies to Stonehenge, where Mystique said Apocalypse's base is. Apocalypse prepares to exterminate Rogue. The Horsemen interrupt him with the news that the X-Men have defeated them. Just then, the X-Men show up and battle Apocalypse's forces again. Rogue takes Archangel's powers. Archangel tells his Horsemen to stop the destruction and turns on them. Apocalypse escapes through a large jet hidden underneath Stonehenge, and 3 of the Horsemen fly away. Rogue realizes she has absorbed the evil part of Archangel. Archangel flies off in his own direction. Bishop recalls that the target of the assassination he was sent to prevent is Gambit, but his attempt is destroyed by the intervention of the other X-Men. He reveals that in his reality, Gambit was responsible for a fatal incident in Washington, D.C., which led to the passage of the Mutant Control Law and the subsequent persecution of mutants by Sentinels. As the situation escalated, humans also became targets, resulting in a destructive takeover of the White House. Despite his knowledge, Bishop struggles to recall the specifics of Gambit's intended target. In a bid to prevent the assassination, the X-Men journey to Washington, leaving Gambit and Bishop under Wolverine's watchful eye at the mansion. Feeling upset, Gambit bears a desire to clear his name and prove his innocence. With cunning and skill, he manages to evade Wolverine and Bishop, using energized cards to make his escape and piloting a jet to Washington. Meanwhile, in Washington, a gang of mutants disrupts the Senate hearings. While the X-Men fight them, their leader, the shapeshifter Mystique, attempts to assassinate Senator Robert Kelly. She tries to frame the X-Men by taking Gambit's form, only to be intervened when the real Gambit arrives to fight her. Bishop arrives having followed Gambit and plans to shoot both Gambit and his double, just to be sure. Rogue stops him by destroying his temporal transceiver, sending Bishop back to his own time, and Senator Kelly is saved. With Gambit unconscious, Mystique reveals her true form, and then further reveals that she is Rogue's foster mother. The Senator and his secretary tell the other X-Men about the assassination attempt, and they find Gambit unconscious. Rogue and Raven Darkholme fly to a nearby pond. Raven says Apocalypse wanted Kelly dead to ensure the human race the future it deserves. We then see some classic mother-daughter bonding as Rogue tries to convince Mystique to leave Apocalypse. However, she refuses and says Apocalypse gives her purpose just as Xavier gives Rogue purpose. Bishop arrives in the future to find that apparently nothing has changed. Forge appears, saying that he will have to go back again and again until things are fixed. He tends to Wolverine's adamantium skeleton, floating in a tank. Although Bishop stopped the assassination, something else must have happened afterward to make the future turn out like this. In the past, Xavier goes to see Senator Kelly only to find that Magneto has kidnapped the senator.
This is the work of the same gang.
Why not, Professor?
Because my watch has stopped.
Magneto brings Senator Kelly to a sunken ship to kill him, so that mutants and humans would go to war. A series of Sentinels made of plastics takes Senator Kelly. Magneto uses the metal from the ship to fight off the Sentinels, but they still manage to attack him. The X-Men find the smashed Magneto and bring him to the X-Mansion to recover, while the Sentinels take Senator Kelly to Master Mold. Thankful for being saved, the Senator agrees with Trask to issue a presidential order putting Sentinels in charge of controlling mutants. A sentinel does not obey Trask's orders, and Master Mold says he is now giving the orders and wants to replace all the world leaders' brains with computers. The X-Men locate Henry Gyrich at the Lincoln Memorial and find out about Master Mold's plans to take over the world. They go to the Sentinels' base and lure the Sentinels outside where Rogue, Storm, and Jubilee keep them busy. The rest of the X-Men sneak underground to save the Senator. Gambit helps Wolverine fight off a large group of Sentinels. The Master Mold tells Trask that since mutants are humans, he should control the humans as well. Jean and Cyclops help the Senator escape. Xavier flies the Blackbird filled with explosives into Master Mold while Magneto shields it from the Sentinels' attacks. They both abandon the plane before it crashes. Kelly realizes that some mutants can be good and releases Beast from jail. Cyclops and Jean decide to get engaged while having a picnic. Sinister monitors their conversation.
Sinister knows what your future holds.
Wolverine trains in the Danger Room against a robot Cyclops, while the real Cyclops marries Jean Grey. The robot changes into a Sentinel version of Cyclops and attacks Wolverine. Outside, the Reverend from the wedding turns into Morph. At the reception, Jean throws the bouquet and Beast catches it by accident. President Kelly had pardoned Beast, but Creed starts a panic by having a mutant attack the area. In his hotel, Morph becomes hysterical, blaming the X-Men for leaving him to die. A mysterious voice convinces Morph to get revenge and destroy all the X-Men. Professor Xavier receives an urgent video call from Magneto, asking him to meet in Antarctica. The video cuts off, revealing that Morph is pretending to be Magneto. Meanwhile, Gambit and Wolverine play pool at a bar while Beast watches. Suddenly, an anti-mutant mob tears down the bar walls. Beast disarms one protester and stops some others from leaving in a car. Creed films the battle on tape. Professor X puts Storm in charge while he is gone. Jubilee turns on the news, which blames Beast for the riot. As Wolverine leaves, Morph sneaks into the mansion disguised as Wolverine. He then shapeshifts into Rogue and tells Gambit she can touch humans without absorbing their powers. Rogue tells Gambit to meet her in the rec room where the real Rogue is asleep. Morph then transforms into Storm and tells Jubilee to prepare for an expected violent anti-mutant attack. Gambit kisses the sleeping Rogue and loses consciousness. Meanwhile, Beast is training in the Danger Room when Morph increases the danger level and locks Beast inside. An anti-mutant mob prepares to attack the Mutant Counseling Center, but Storm and Rogue stop them. Morph, now disguised as a police captain, orders the other policemen to fire at Storm with full energy, knocking her out of the sky. Sinister watches as Morph enjoys his revenge on the X-Men. Cyclops and his new wife, Jean, set out for an island honeymoon on a yacht. Meanwhile, Beast continues evading the dangerous attacks in the Danger Room and eventually manages to escape. Outside the X-Mansion, Morph remembers being an X-Man but is reminded by Mr. Sinister that the X-Men abandoned him. Sinister declares he will handle Cyclops and Jean Grey himself. As Cyclops and Jean reach their island destination, the mutant ruckus capsizes their boat with a loud scream. Other members of Sinister's Nasty Boys place Genosha mutant slave collars on the couple. Back at the hospital, Rogue and Beast sneak in to check on Storm's condition. At a Friends of Humanity rally, Creed puts Jubilee on stage, escorted by two gunmen. The crowd demands her removal, and Creed orders the gunmen to take her away. Wolverine crashes through the ceiling window and rescues Jubilee. Gambit recovers from his kiss with Rogue, and Professor Xavier arrives, suggesting a neural disruptor might be altering their brain waves. Wolverine and Jubilee return, with Wolverine saying he smells Morph. The professor dismisses the neural disruptor theory, but soon reveals his true form as Morph. Wolverine and Jubilee ambush Morph from inside a jet. Morph shapeshifts into Wolverine, leading Jubilee to accidentally attack the real Wolverine. Mr. Sinister plans to use Cyclops and Jean's DNA to create a slave army of unbeatable mutants. The X-Men inform Storm about Morph's return. Morph finds the newlywed couple and reveals he was the Reverend who married them. Before Morph can harm Cyclops, Mr. Sinister intervenes, explaining that he found Morph's lifeless body and healed him. The X-Men arrive and battle the Nasty Boys. They gain the upper hand until Mr. Sinister joins the fight. Cyclops tells Morph that he is still one of the X-Men, prompting Morph to turn on Sinister. However, the attack has no effect on Sinister. Cyclops breaks free from his restraints and helps Jean escape. Cyclops then attacks Sinister, who crumbles under the assault. Sinister and his forces retreat. Morph leaves on a plane, with Wolverine deciding to follow him. Meanwhile, Xavier and Magneto meet in Antarctica. Xavier suspects a trap, and an avalanche crashes down on both of them. In the future, Cable realizes his world is disappearing because of Bishop's time-traveling interference. Bishop had traveled from 2055 AD to stop a plague that Apocalypse started. The plague was scientifically engineered and used by terrorist groups to increase anti-mutant sentiment, falsely accusing mutants of spreading it. The X-Men succeed in destroying Apocalypse's lab, but are killed by Apocalypse in the process. Cable, horrified, realizes he must team up with Apocalypse to save his timeline. He travels to the present to stop Bishop and save his future world. He arrives at the same time as Bishop, and the two time travelers battle to save their respective futures. Cable finds killing Bishop and helping Apocalypse distasteful, but is prepared to do whatever it takes to save his son and his future. Eventually, Cable comes up with a plan to deliberately let Wolverine get infected by the virus. Wolverine's healing abilities produce the antibodies needed to create a permanent cure, thwarting Apocalypse. Bishop returns to his timeline and discovers everything is still the same, but there is no longer a plague. Cable returns to his timeline and finds his world is saved and his son is alive. Mr. Sinister informs Mystique that Professor Xavier is away from the X-Men and encourages her to reclaim her daughter. When Avalanche, Pyro, and Blob attack a farmer's market, the X-Men confront them. During the fight, Rogue starts seeing flashes of a mysterious woman, which causes her to lash out at several X-Men and even become possessed by the woman's personality. The X-Men later identify the woman in multiple news reports. Rogue is drawn to a hospital where Mystique and her Brotherhood are waiting for her and the X-Men. The Brotherhood battles Cyclops, Wolverine, Gambit, and Storm, while Mystique confronts Rogue at the bedside of a Jane Doe. Mystique encourages Rogue to touch her to restore her lost memories. Rogue does so and remembers that after she kissed Cody Robbins and was disowned by her father, she ran away and was adopted by Mystique, working alongside her and the Brotherhood. Rogue recollects that Mystique taught her how to use her powers. In a confrontation with Ms. Marvel, Mystique ordered Rogue to hold on to her, which left Ms. Marvel comatose and Rogue permanently possessing her super strength and flight, but also with Ms. Marvel's personality inside her mind. When the flashes of Ms. Marvel started haunting her, Rogue couldn't cope and ran away again. Professor Xavier then found her and erased her memories to help her. In the present, Rogue rejects Mystique's reconciliation, feeling used. Jean Grey attempts to help Rogue in her mind, and Rogue fights the Ms. Marvel personality, eventually sealing away with Jean's psychic assistance. Rogue tells Mystique that she isn't her daughter anymore and flies off. Later, Rogue spends time with Jane Doe, the real Ms. Marvel, Carol Danvers. Carol's vital signs start to indicate on the monitor. Professor X, Magneto, Jean Grey, and Morph are chained up in Mr. Sinister's lair in the Savage Land. Meanwhile, the X-Men arrive in the Savage Land and discover their powers no longer work. They soon encounter the Nasty Boys, who easily defeat them. Wolverine escapes the brawl while the others are taken back to Sinister's lair. Dodging a few dinosaurs, Wolverine bumps into Kazar and his companion Zabu. After a brief confrontation, they decide to team up and attack Sinister's base to free the captives. Meanwhile, Sinister tells the captive X-Men that he plans to use their DNA to create a race of slaves to help him take over the world. Magneto's strength is then sapped from him and transferred to Vertigo, boosting her powers. She uses her enhanced powers on the captives. Wolverine and Kazar arrive at the lair just as Rogue and Gambit confess their feelings for each other. Wolverine enters the main base and distracts the Nasty Boys, allowing Kazar to sneak into the holding cells and free the prisoners. Ruckus attacks the escapees, but Wolverine manages to free the X-Men. Xavier smashes a chair against the power dampening machine, which makes him lose the use of his legs again, but restores his and the other captive mutants' powers. A fight ensues, and the X-Men, Magneto, and Morph manage to prevail. Sinister, the last villain standing, tries to assert his mind control over Morph again, but Xavier uses his power to remove the conditioning from Morph's mind. Everyone fires at Sinister, causing him to explode into tiny pieces. However, the villain tries to reform himself, so Jean uses her power to push these pieces out into the Savage Land. Sauron self-destructs the Citadel and the heroes evacuate. Later, the X-Men help the natives of the Savage Land rebuild their village. Magneto leaves, saying nothing has changed between him and the X-Men. The space shuttle crash lands in Jamaica Bay. Though the other X-Men are unharmed, Jean Grey's fate is unknown. Suddenly, she flies into the air, displaying powers and a new costume she has never used before. She proclaims herself the Phoenix before collapsing, suffering from confusion, memory loss, and vast new powers. Meanwhile, Xavier, sensing something is amiss, uses Cerebro to probe Jean's mind. However, during this psychic connection, Xavier's dark side, manifested as a sinister version of himself called the Dark Shroud, is unleashed. This dark entity represents the suppressed negative emotions and fears within Xavier's subconscious. The Dark Shroud escapes into the real world and begins attacking the X-Men, exploiting their fears and weaknesses. This leads to intense confrontations as the team must not only defend themselves but also contend with the psychological manipulations of the Dark Shroud. Meanwhile, Professor Xavier battles internally to regain control over his mind and suppress the Dark Shroud. Jean, still struggling with the Phoenix Force, ultimately plays a crucial role in helping Xavier. Her newfound powers allow her to assist in subduing the Dark Shroud, showcasing her potential but also hinting at the danger of the Phoenix power. With Jean's help, Xavier manages to regain control and suppress the Dark Shroud. The X-Men regroup and acknowledge the growing threat of the Phoenix Force, recognizing that Jean's transformation is both a blessing and a potential curse. The X-Men respond to a distress signal from their teammate Banshee and arrive at Cassidy Keep in Ireland. They are ambushed and captured by Banshee's cousin Black Tom Cassidy and his partner, Juggernaut. Black Tom plans to use the captured X-Men as bait to lure Professor Xavier for revenge. Sensing her friend's peril, Jean Grey, now embodying the Phoenix Force, flies to their rescue. She breaks into Cassidy Keep and frees the X-Men, engaging in a fierce battle with Black Tom and Juggernaut. With Jean's Phoenix abilities and the combined efforts of the team, they overpower the villains. As the battle concludes, Lilandra, an exiled Sheer Princess, arrives with a dire warning about Emperor Diken and the unstable Macron Crystal, which threatens universal destruction. Realizing the gravity of the situation, the X-Men agree to help Lilandra and prepare for a journey into space to stop Diken. In the end, the X-Men board a Sheer ship and set off towards the Macron Crystal, ready to face the impending cosmic threat. The X-Men and Lilandra, the exiled Sheer Princess, are on a stolen Sheer ship evading capture en route to the Macron Crystal. They are attacked by the Starjammers, a group of space pirates led by Corsair, who is revealed to be Cyclops' long-lost father, Christopher Summers. Realizing they share a common enemy in Emperor Ken, the X-Men and the Starjammers form an alliance. Corsair explains Deacon's tyranny across the galaxy, and together, they set a course for the Macron Crystal. Jean Grey, now fully embodying the Phoenix, senses the immense danger ahead. Upon arriving at the Macron Crystal, they infiltrate Deacon's heavily guarded stronghold. Through intense battles, they discover Deacon's plan to use the crystal's power to reshape the universe according to his vision. They then confront a powerful guardian within Deacon's sanctum, setting the stage for a final, desperate battle. The X-Men and the Imperial Guard battle the nearly omnipotent Diken, who has merged with the Macron Crystal's power. The crystal's instability causes catastrophic environmental disasters on Earth, threatening the planet's existence. Jean, embracing her Phoenix identity, decides to enter the Macron Crystal. Inside, she encounters a powerful cosmic entity causing the instability. Diken, fused with the crystal's power, challenges her, leading to an epic battle. As Phoenix, Jean struggles with balancing her immense power and human emotions. Drawing on her deep connection with the Phoenix Force, Jean stabilizes the crystal, overcoming Diken and reversing the environmental disasters on Earth. To ensure crystal stability, she sacrifices her Phoenix persona in a selfless act, highlighting her heroism. With the threat neutralized, the X-Men and the Imperial Guard part ways, reflecting on Jean's bravery and the personal cost of her actions. The team mourns the loss of Phoenix, but celebrates Jean's return and her role in saving the universe. Warren Worthington, i.e., also known as Archangel, is consumed by vengeance against Apocalypse for enslaving him on Muir Island. Despite his efforts to uncover Apocalypse's weaknesses, Archangel comes up empty-handed. His determination only grows, and he refuses to let anyone leave until he finds a way to destroy Apocalypse. Eventually, he receives a scroll suggesting a vulnerable spot at the back of Apocalypse's neck. Driven by his thirst for revenge, Archangel confronts Apocalypse on Liberty Island but fails to defeat him. Meanwhile, the X-Men detect a mysterious vessel above the ocean and witness the battle on Liberty Island. They rush to save Archangel before it's too late. After a fierce battle, Apocalypse retreats and the X-Men bring Archangel back to the mansion. While some X-Men fear Archangel's recklessness will lead to his demise, Rogue, who absorbed some of his energy previously, believes in his humanity. The team discusses ways to defeat Apocalypse despite his apparent immortality, and they realize the ship they discovered holds weapons that could help them. As Rogue tends to Archangel's wounds, he asks her to join him in the fight against Apocalypse. Despite the X-Men's plan, Archangel refuses to listen and leaves with Rogue following him. They find the ship, but it sets off a self-destruct alarm. However, the ship saves them, and they succeed in their mission. During a final confrontation with Apocalypse at a fairground, Archangel's rage blinds him to the danger posed to innocent lives. Gambit tries to intervene, but Apocalypse's trap is revealed, and Archangel destroys the force field generator in a fit of anger. Apocalypse reveals that he orchestrated the entire plan to lure Archangel to him, exploiting his thirst for vengeance. Apocalypse then activates an override code, turning the ship against them. Beast, however, discovers a stone tablet which can override Apocalypse's override. Apocalypse is trapped in a force field again, and then imprisoned in a giant spaceship. The ship itself is slowly dying due to Archangel's destruction of the controls and uses the last of its energy to help Beast rescue the others. They flee in the Blackbird before the whole ship is destroyed. Apocalypse, still inside the other spaceship, flies off into deep space, vowing that he would return. Back on the Blackbird, the ship tells Beast that Apocalypse will not be gone forever, but they are safe for a while. Cyclops then berates Archangel for allowing his vengeful behavior to put them all in danger. Archangel refuses to listen and feels betrayed when even Rogue tells him that there is nothing more that can be done to Apocalypse. He flees, vowing that he will destroy Apocalypse one day. Rogue apologizes to the others for allowing Archangel's behavior to get out of hand and not listening to Gambit. The ship finally falls into the sea, sinks beneath the surface, and says goodbye, with a tearful Beast saying goodbye back as the tablet shuts down forever. Iceman is breaking into a government facility when Professor X is alerted to this. He sends his X-Men to apprehend their former teammate, and on the way, they discuss Iceman's attitude with the team. Arriving in the facility, the team manages to subdue Iceman and bring him back to the mansion, where he is placed in a detention cell. Iceman tells Beast that he had left the X-Men because his then-girlfriend, Polaris, was injured on a mission. Polaris left with him, and the two were living together until Iceman found his house ransacked and Polaris gone. Iceman tracks her down to the government facility where the X-Men capture him. Jubilee, feeling sorry for Iceman, frees him, and together they go back to the facility, looking for Polaris. Once there, they are knocked out by X-Factor. The X-Men arrive looking for Iceman and Jubilee, and who they find after they have woken up and broken free from their bonds. The group encounters X-Factor again, and Forge reveals that the facility is his team's training grounds, sponsored by the government. Polaris tells Iceman that she secretly joined the team and has fallen in love with Havoc. The X-Men and Iceman return to the mansion, and Professor X convinces Iceman to return to the team, but he declines the offer and leaves. In Germany, local townspeople gather in the aims of ridding a demon from their town. The demon turns out to be Nightcrawler, who is hiding in the town's church. Meanwhile, the X-Men are on a skiing holiday in the Alps. Overhearing a conversation about demons, Wolverine asks some holidaymakers about these supposed demons. He, Rogue, and Gambit then go skiing, looking for any demons. Gambit accidentally causes an avalanche which buries the three X-Men. After passing out in the snow, the three awaken a chapel and meet Brother Reinhardt, who is anxious at having strangers in the chapel. Reinhardt tries to knock out Gambit but fails, and Rogue gives chase to the villain. Rogue falls from a ledge but is rescued by Nightcrawler. Everyone assumes that it was Nightcrawler who tried to attack Gambit, with Wolverine attacking the mutant. Johan appears and informs the X-Men that Nightcrawler is in fact a brother of the Abbot and an ally despite his demonic appearance. Nightcrawler tells his origin, showing how he was abandoned by his mother as a baby, revealed to the viewers as Mystique, and how he later dedicated his life to God and joined the Abbey. Wolverine is skeptical at first as he does not believe in God, but later consoles in Nightcrawler that he had lost his faith in religion. Meanwhile, Reinhardt goes down to the nearby village and tells the villagers that the demon they are looking for is up at his chapel and he has allies with him. The villagers march up to the chapel and attack Nightcrawler and the X-Men. The chapel soon catches alight and Nightcrawler manages to save Reinhardt's life, convincing him that he is not a threat. Wolverine, Rogue, and Gambit arrive in Paris to finish their vacation, and Wolverine is seen praying at the cathedral, his faith restored by Nightcrawler. In the year 2055, Forge is alerted to a temporal rift in the past, and he sends Bishop and his sister Shard back to the past through his time machine in hopes to get help from the X-Men. However, when they touch down in 1995, they arrive in a war-torn world, where mutants and ordinary humans are in an endless fight for their respective species' survival. In this alternate reality, it is revealed that Professor Charles Xavier has been erased from the timeline, resulting in this war-torn reality, without his efforts to make peace between mutants and ordinary humans. Bishop and Shard manage to convince Wolverine and Storm, who are husband and wife in this reality, of the changes that resulted in Professor X being erased from history, and to force him head back to 1959 in an attempt to stop a mutant criminal named Fitzroy and his sidekick Bantam before they can carry out the assassination of the young Charles Xavier. However, in the midst of a small brawl within a local diner, Charles runs out scared after he learns about his future, back toward the college and the school laboratory to think about these things. Meanwhile, after finishing the brawl, Bishop, Shard, Wolverine, and Storm split up to find Xavier, but they are soon ambushed by Nimrod, the Sentinel from the future. As Bishop, Wolverine, and Storm engage Nimrod in battle, Shard continues searching for Fitzroy, finding him as he is just leaving the school laboratory. However, she is too late to capture him as he and Bantam escape back through the portal to the future. At the same time, after Wolverine, Storm, and Bishop manage to dismantle Nimrod, the Sentinel escapes back to the future along with the mutant criminals. Back inside the school lab, Charles has doubts about what he just saw and decides that he could never be capable of such power. But just as he opens the door to exit the lab, Fitzroy's detonator is triggered. The four time travelers race toward the lab as it explodes due to Fitzroy's detonator, but they are too late as they discover that the young Charles Xavier was caught in the blast. After evading another battle thanks to Storm's quick thinking and a whirlwind that suspends a mob ready to attack them, Shard decides that they need to see if they can head back to the future and ask Forge for help. They indeed succeed in returning to 2055, but find themselves engaged in battle with new Sentinels created by Master Mold, because the Forge of this reality has no memory of who Bishop and Shard are. After making quick work of these new Sentinels, called Enforcers, they convince Forge to reset the time portal for 1959, but the main mechanism was severely damaged in the fight. While Forge works to fix his time portal, Fitzroy informs Master Mold of his apparent victory. But Master Mold berates him for not eliminating the four time travelers who tried to stop him, because now Master Mold says if they escape, they will use the time machine to reset history as it should be. After sending Fitzroy and Bantam to destroy the time portal, he orders Nimrod to eliminate the duo after the portal is destroyed. Back at the portal site, Forge almost has the portal operational again, but more Enforcers along with Nimrod, Fitzroy, and Bantam arrive. But to Bishop's shock, Fitzroy traps Nimrod inside a force field and gives Bishop a message that he says will explain everything, before he is blasted by Nimrod, who blasts itself free from Fitzroy's force field. Just as the portal becomes fully operational, Shard is injured by Nimrod while attempting to protect Forge. After some encouragement from Shard to finish the mission without her, Bishop, Wolverine, and Storm leap through the portal back to 1959, just as Nimrod moves in on Shard and Forge to destroy them. Once back in 1959, Bishop, Storm, and Wolverine play the message from Fitzroy and then manage to intercept Charles Xavier as he is racing out of the diner. After convincing Charles that he will be destroyed in the school laboratory, Wolverine, Storm, and Bishop make a plan to intercept Nimrod and Fitzroy, but Nimrod ambushes them again and attempts to destroy the time travelers. Bishop manages to target Nimrod's temporal transceiver and destroy it, which sends Nimrod back to the future. But then, Fitzroy arrives with his detonator that destroyed Xavier the first time. Ensuring that he will succeed, Fitzroy also traps Xavier and the time travelers within a force field dome, but Storm and Bishop convince him to let them go after playing the message given to them by Fitzroy's alternate future self. After Fitzroy deactivates the force field, Wolverine throws the detonator out the window, where it harmlessly explodes, restoring the timeline. With his plan destroyed, Fitzroy drains Xavier's energy, knocking him unconscious, and uses it to travel back to the future, along with Bantam. Bishop uses his temporal transceiver to do the same, and Wolverine and Storm share one last kiss after deactivating their own transceivers, which restores the original reality. Magneto kidnaps some astronauts and crashes into the UN. There, he announces on TV that he has established a living space on an asteroid in space for all mutants who wish to be away from humanity. Professor X, watching Magneto's speech, is saddened as he thinks that he has failed in his mission to bring humanity and mutants together. Gambit wonders if he should leave for Asteroid M as he starts to doubt that the X-Men are making much progress towards their goal. The professor talks with President Kelly, who is worried about Magneto and if he has any real intentions. Professor X, Beast, and Gambit head off to meet with Magneto, whom they find preparing to send a batch of mutants up to the asteroid. Magneto joins the group as they travel to Genosha, where mutants are still being captured and used for slave labor. On the island, the trio of X-Men, Magneto, and his followers, including the Acolytes, fight a group of Sentinels. After the fight, Fabian Cortez suggests that all the humans be murdered, but Magneto just releases all the captive mutants and everyone travels up to the asteroid. Once on Asteroid M, Magneto deals with a laser satellite attack, thinking it was an unprovoked attack on the mutants, but learns that it was a retaliatory attack as a missile had been fired from the asteroid. Professor X meets up with his ex-girlfriend Amelia Vaught, but she abruptly denies him. Magneto learns that Cortez fired the missile, but also finds out that he is dependent on Cortez's powers, and so he fires Magneto out into space in a capsule. Cortez then blames the X-Men for assassinating Magneto. The X-Men, led by Professor Xavier, are determined to stop Magneto's plans, fearing that his actions will only escalate the conflict between mutants and humans. As the X-Men travel to Asteroid M, they encounter various challenges and obstacles. Magneto's magnetic powers make it difficult for them to approach the asteroid. Upon reaching Asteroid M, the X-Men confront Magneto and his Brotherhood of Mutants. A heated battle ensues between the two groups, with both sides using their powers to gain the upper hand. Meanwhile, Xavier attempts to reason with Magneto, urging him to reconsider his actions and find a peaceful solution. However, Magneto remains steadfast in his belief that mutants need to assert their dominance over humans to ensure their survival. The situation becomes more complicated when one of Magneto's own followers, Fabian Cortez, betrays him and attempts to take control of Asteroid M for his own agenda and sends hundreds of missiles toward Earth. Meanwhile, Rogue goes to help the X-Men and tries to find a missing Gambit. Magneto frees himself and returns in time to destroy both the missiles and Asteroid M. Everyone escapes before the asteroid is destroyed, and they all return home, Gambit included. Meanwhile, Cortez is rescued from the descending asteroid by Deathbird and Apocalypse. In 3999, Cable attacks Apocalypse.
Stupid.
But Apocalypse steals his time device and uses it to arrive at the axis of time, which causes Bishop to be thrown off course and trapped at the axis of time. Present day, Jean and Scott finally get married again. Just as they are driving off after the ceremony, the Nasty Boys kidnap Jean, leaving Scott behind. Shard, Bishop's sister, travels to the present day in search of Bishop and arrives in time to see Mr. Sinister trying to take Xavier. Apocalypse captures powerful psychics from various timelines, including Professor X and Jean Grey, to power his time-manipulating device. His ultimate goal is to reshape history to his liking, posing a significant threat to the entire timeline. Lilandra warns Xavier of Apocalypse, and Xavier determines that he is capturing psychics. In anticipation, Shard and Wolverine go to protect Psylocke. Still, she is kidnapped by Magneto and taken to Apocalypse in the Axis of Time Control Center. In 3999, Cable reveals a plan to go back in time. Cable attempts to travel back in time using his ship, but Apocalypse disrupts his journey, causing him to land in the present at the X-Mansion. Recognizing their shared objective to stop Apocalypse, Cable teams up with the X-Men. The group learns about the Lazarus Chamber, an ancient facility in Kara that can restore Apocalypse to full power and immortality. Determined to destroy Apocalypse's plans, the X-Men and Cable devise a strategy to travel back in time to destroy the chamber. Upon arriving in ancient Cairo, the X-Men are met with formidable challenges. However, Apocalypse, having anticipated their actions, uses this diversion to execute his own plan. Seizing the opportunity, he teleports Professor Xavier to the axis of time, a critical component of his scheme to reshape history. Cable and the X-Men destroy the Lazarus Chamber. They then use Cable's computer and Cerebro to trace a homing device on the Professor to the control axis, where Apocalypse reveals his plan to use the psychics to destroy all time and recreate a universe where he will rule unchallenged. Feeling that he was deceived by Apocalypse, Magneto attacks him when Cable arrives and joins the attack. Apocalypse begins draining the psychics, which causes time and history to start to disappear. Bishop sees this and releases the psychics. Sinister and the Nasty Boys retreat. The heroes defeat the four horsemen of Apocalypse. In the end, the psychics move Apocalypse to the astral plane. Using Cable's time and spaceship, everyone else is returned to the present time at the mansion. Cable travels back to his time. Scarlet Witch, Quicksilver, and Magneto are lured and captured by the High Evolutionary and his new men. They imprison them along with Wolverine, who is spying on Magneto. The Evolutionary reveals that he wants to use their genetics and powers to create a new breed of beings, which he demonstrates by transforming Wolverine into a werewolf. He also reveals that Magneto is Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch's father. Magneto admits to the twins Quicksilver and Scarlet that he regrets abandoning their mother, his wife Magda. Beast and Professor X locate them as Magneto breaks the others free when the High Evolutionary escapes. Wolverine reverts back and the twins walk away from Magneto despite his effort to reconcile with them. At the memorial of Jean, Beast finishes his story with Jubilee being the affected one. Cyclops looks at the modest shrine to Jean, who sacrificed herself to keep the Macran crystal with Deakin trapped inside safe. He is furious with Xavier over the never-ending battle against the despising propaganda against mutant kind and resigns from the X-Men. On a bus, Scott thinks back to when other foster families rejected him due to his mutant powers. Elsewhere, a man named Zebediah Kilgrave is donating money for a new Kilco energy plant at the edge of a river, though Governor Barkley opposes his methods. Arriving back at the McNeil orphanage he grew up at, Cyclops remembers when his mutant powers triggered during a kid's game when his former caretaker Sarah shows up to him. Sarah is delighted to meet her old friend again. When her husband dies, Sarah used to be a volunteer for the orphanage, now she runs it. Scott tells his caretaker his special someone to him is gone. Over a cup of tea, Sarah and Scott discuss Kilgrave, who has pledged scholarships to disadvantaged children and kept the orphanage from closing down so far. He's even adopted 5 mutant kids. Still feeling dejected, Scott suddenly hears the smoke alarms going off. He and Sarah race to rescue trapped children upstairs while the former extinguishes the fire with his optic beams and finds the source. A kid with fire mutant abilities named Rusty Collins. Rusty explains that he doesn't want to go back to Kilgrave's home, and Cyclops lectures him on his mutant abilities. Cyclops shows his powers by blasting an abandoned building and shows his pain of growing up without a proper home. While Scott didn't get far without friends who care for him, Rusty is suspicious about his adopter, who has a torture chamber in his home and wants to run the governor out of office. Sarah assures him that Kilgrave will provide utmost care, though Scott wonders about Rusty's warnings, even though the fiery mutant has gotten in trouble with the law countless times. Just then, Kilgrave arrives with the police, who explains that a clean break for the kids is best. He also says Rusty is not used to fatherly discipline, so Rusty goes with his adopter while Scott looks on suspiciously. In his home, Kilgrave forces Rusty into a restraining chair and shines a bright purple light from his eyes, compelling him to obey him. Also among the enslaved mutant kids are a Japanese wheelchair-bound mutant named Taki, a sliding mutant named Skids, and an explosives mutant named Boom Boom. Kilgrave teaches his adopted kids to overcome the hatred of mutants through terror and force. Kilgrave promises to make the kids politicians, bankers, and leaders under his banner, and make the humans pay for the way they treated them. At the Capitol building, Taki changes his wheelchair into a high-speed vehicle to clear the fence. Skids does a high-speed sliding kick to some guards, while Boom Boom uses explosive orbs to blast others. While Kilgrave makes it inside, Rusty blocks the entrance with a wall of fire. While Scott feels lumpy over sleeping on the couch at the orphanage, Sarah is intrigued by the mention of Jean, whom Scott is having continuous nightmares over. Although he does not wish to discuss his tragedy, overhears a news report over Governor Barkley being compelled to resign from office over health problems, paving the way for Kilgrave's energy plant. This arouses Scott's suspicions about Rusty's warnings to him, and they decide to pay Kilgrave a visit. Sarah is shocked over Kilgrave's criminal activities. Kilgrave applies makeup to cover his purple face, then he and his henchman Wayne answer Scott at the door. The optic mutant suspects Rusty and the other kids are in danger, but the adopter insists the kids are safe, improving their minds. The kids greet Scott in a robotic-like fashion, and Rusty, under his enslaver's control, insists he was wrong about him. Taki is compelled to ram Scott, and Wayne dumps the unconscious former X-Man into the swimming pool, while Kilgrave leaves to attend a conference. Scott has a dream of kissing Jean, reuniting with her, but it is really Sarah who had rescued him from drowning. Just as Kilgrave's propaganda video lessons finally have the mutant kids in his grasp, Cyclops blasts the screen and lectures that acceptance must be earned and not forced on others. Skids insists she wants to go back to the orphanage. Back at the orphanage, the kids are sleeping, and Sarah has called in news crews and authorities. She was also foolish to trust Kilgrave, who appears to have a majority of the state in his power. The caretaker was not shocked that Cyclops used his powers before her and realized it when they were younger, and he blasted a bike by accident. While the other kids were cruel to Scott, Sarah cared deeply for him. But then, Kilgrave shows up in a helicopter demanding his children back, but Sarah turns him down. Furious that he did not kill the one who found out about his plans sooner, Kilgrave uses the helicopter's minigun to open fire on his enemy. A newswoman shows up to record Kilgrave's propaganda about Sarah hating mutants. Cyclops says as long as he lives, the purple-faced villain will never steal the mutant kids. Kilgrave again mind controls the kids and compels Rusty to immolate the orphanage. Desperate, Cyclops blasts the helicopter, forcing Kilgrave and his henchmen to jump out, presumably to be arrested. Sarah dashes in to rescue Taki, who is trapped inside the burning orphanage, and Scott lapses about when he lost Jean. Not wanting to make another sacrifice, Cyclops battles the fire with his optic beams and gets Taki out just as the building collapses. Sarah promises to rebuild and offers Scott a chance to live in the orphanage like the good old days. Having learned a valuable lesson, Scott knows there is another family he belongs to. As Cyclops rejoins the X-Men, Cerebro's scans have spotted Jean alive and well, much to Scott's relief. Henry Gyerich presents a televised diatribe against the dangers that mutants pose to ordinary humans, encouraging the ratification of the Mutant Containment Bill. Charles Xavier, who seems to be ill from weeks of battling this legislation, arrives to oppose the suggestion. Gyrich voices his suspicion that Xavier, known for protecting mutants, could well be a mutant himself and attacks him with a small device, an energy destructor that makes Xavier's powers go out of control and puts him in a coma. Gyrich himself is dragged away by police, raving that normal-looking people who defend mutants are mutants themselves. Cyclops, Wolverine, and Beast rush to the Professor's aid. On the Blackbird, Beast reveals that Xavier is still fighting to stay alive, and Cyclops radios the mansion to prepare the medlab and contact Moira MacTaggart on Muir Island. Unfortunately, Moira seems unable to help and says that Xavier is beyond the help of medical science. Beast considers contacting Lilandra of the Shi'ar, who would have advanced medical technology unavailable on Earth, although without Xavier, they are not sure how to do this. Meanwhile, on Genosha, the attack on Xavier, who is as normal as mutants get, sparks fury, and many mutants start preparing for war with humanity. They clamor for Magneto to lead them. Mutant uprisings begin all over the world, even taking total control of some cities. Morph takes on Xavier's form in a televised broadcast calling for an end to the violence, although it has little effect. The X-Men realize that they will have to attack Magneto directly on Genosha to have any hope of stopping Xavier's dream from falling apart. Since thousands of mutants have gone to Genosha ahead of them, they deem it a suicide mission. But Cyclops, Jean, and Wolverine go anyway. As they approach Genosha, Magneto uses his powers to destroy the Blackbird. The three passengers jettison and survive the fall thanks to Jean's powers. They break into Magneto's fortress while he is giving a speech to his followers. They fight him and seem to be losing, but Magneto suddenly stops when he discovers that Xavier's televised message was fake and that Xavier himself is dying. Jean realizes that Magneto could use his powers to augment Xavier's powers and contact Lilandra. Magneto is hesitant, since it will mean giving up the army at his command and the chance to change the world that he has been waiting his life for, but he eventually agrees because of the love he has for Xavier. Back at the mansion, Magneto uses his powers to help Xavier send his psychic message. Xavier regains consciousness and says goodbye to each of his X-Men separately. He says he is proud of them all, and then seems to pass away. Lilandra arrives and says that Shi'ar technology can extend Xavier's life, but only while he is under their care. She takes Xavier away, but with one last telepathic message, he promises that his spirit will always be with his X-Men. So that will be it from us. If you enjoyed the video, let us know your favorite part of it. Also, do not forget to leave us a like and subscribe to our channel for similar content. Thanks for watching. We'll see you at the next one.